The rain had just stopped when Emily rushed into the towering glass building, clutching her baby close to her chest. She was late. Her hair was damp, her suit a little wrinkled, and the baby shifted uneasily in her arms. She whispered, "Just hold on, sweetheart, Mommy needs this." The lobby was filled with polished shoes, sharp suits, and the cold scent of ambition. She felt out of place. Every other candidate held a folder, not a child. But she had no choice. Her sitter had canceled. Last minute, and she couldn't miss this opportunity. The receptionist glanced at her with raised brows but said nothing. Emily's heart pounded as she took the elevator up to the 20th floor. By the time the doors opened, her baby let out a soft cry, echoing through the hall. Heads turned. Whispers followed. She straightened her back and walked toward the interview room. Inside, the air was heavy with silence. 5 other candidates sat in perfect rows, holding resumes like shields. At the far end, behind a massive oak desk, sat Alexander Grant, the youngest, most feared CEO in the city. His presence was magnetic, his tailored suit flawless, his gaze sharp. When Emily entered, every head tilted. Some eyes were mocking, some pitying. The baby squirmed again. Alexander looked up from his papers, his brows narrowing. Then, unexpectedly, his gaze softened. He studied her, the baby, and the fire in her eyes that refused to dim. "Ms. Walker," his voice carried authority. "You brought a child to an interview?" Emily's throat tightened. She clutched her baby closer. "Yes, sir. I didn't want to disrespect your time by canceling. I'm here because I need this job. I'll give everything I have to prove it." The room shifted. Some candidates smirked. One rolled her eyes. But Alexander leaned back, intrigued. He saw no excuses, only determination. Something stirred in him, something he hadn't felt in years. "Interesting," he murmured, his lips curving faintly. "Very interesting." At that moment, Emily didn't realize that this interview was about to change not just her career, but her entire life. "Very interesting," Alexander repeated, his gaze still fixed on Emily. The other candidates stiffened. They expected her to be dismissed, yet she was the one holding the CEO's full attention. Alexander set the papers aside. "Let's begin," he said, his voice clipped. "Each of you will present your case for why you deserve this position." One by one, the candidates spoke. Their words were polished, rehearsed, filled with jargon. Emily listened, her heart racing. She bounced her baby gently, praying he wouldn't cry again. Finally, it was her turn. She rose, every eye on her, and spoke with steady calm. "I may not have the perfect background or the perfect circumstances, but I know struggle. I know how to work when the odds are against me. I can solve problems because I've lived them. I don't just want this job, I need it. And I'll fight every day to keep it." Silence followed. Alexander's jaw tightened. He saw raw honesty in her, something none of the others dared show. For years, he'd been surrounded by ambition cloaked in vanity. She was different. He dismissed the room, but when Emily turned to leave, he stopped her. "Stay." Her chest rose sharply. She stood frozen as the others left, murmuring in disbelief. Alexander leaned forward, his eyes locked on hers. "You're bold, that can't be taught. But tell me, how do you expect to handle the demands of this role while raising a child?" Emily swallowed hard. "Because failure isn't an option, for me, or for him." She nodded to the baby in her arms. For the first time in years, Alexander felt something break through the steel walls around his heart. He remembered his own lonely childhood, the emptiness of being raised by nannies and strangers. This woman, standing tall with nothing but determination, made him question everything he believed about strength. He stood. "Report back tomorrow. The position is yours." Emily blinked, stunned. "But what about the others?" Alexander's voice dropped, low and certain. "They didn't give me a reason to believe in them. You did." The office lights hummed quietly as Emily sat at her new desk on the 12th floor. Her heart still carried the weight of yesterday's words. Alexander Grant, the man feared across the city's boardrooms, had told her she was hired. The shock hadn't worn off. She had walked home holding her baby tighter than ever, whispering that their lives were finally changing. Now, dressed in the same navy suit, she straightened her files and tried to drown out the whispers around her. Some colleagues were curious. Others were openly cruel. "She brought a baby to an interview," someone muttered near the coffee machine. "She won't last a week," another voice chimed. Emily kept her head high. She had learned long ago that the world always judged, but survival demanded silence and persistence. From the glass office above, Alexander noticed it all. He saw the way she ignored the stares, how her jaw clenched but her hands stayed steady as she typed. He admired that resilience. He had built his empire by crushing weakness, yet something about her made him redefine what strength truly looked like. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the skyline, Emily was still at her desk. Papers spread, laptop open, her brow furrowed. The office had mostly emptied, the silence broken only by her baby's picture taped near her monitor. Alexander appeared unexpectedly, his footsteps quiet on the carpet. Emily startled when she looked up and found him standing there. "You're still here," he said, his voice calm but carrying an edge of curiosity. "Yes," she replied quickly. "I wanted to finish this report. I don't want to give you any reason to regret your decision." His lips curved, almost a smile. "I don't regret it. Not for a second." Her breath caught. For a moment she forgot this was her boss, the man everyone feared. He looked less like a CEO and more like a man who meant every word. She lowered her gaze, reminding herself of boundaries she couldn't afford to cross. In the weeks that followed, Emily threw herself into work. She arrived early, stayed late, and absorbed everything like a sponge. She discovered skills she didn't know she had. But no matter how much effort she poured in, she couldn't silence the hum of gossip. Some said she had earned her place through pity. Others whispered she must have charmed the CEO. Each word was a blade, but she refused to bleed. Alexander, however, grew restless. He found excuses to pass through her department. Meetings he could have delegated, he attended. Reports others could deliver, he asked from her. At first, he told himself it was to test her, to see if she was truly capable. But deep down, he knew the truth. He wanted to see her, to hear her voice, to catch the rare, quiet laugh she sometimes let slip when she thought no one was listening. One late afternoon, he called her into his office. She entered nervously, clutching her notebook. The space was intimidating. Dark leather chairs, towering, shelves of law books, city lights sprawling beyond the window. "You've been here a few weeks now," Alexander began. "Tell me honestly, how do you feel?" Emily hesitated. "Grateful, but..." She exhaled. "Sometimes I feel like I don't belong, like everyone is waiting for me to fail." He studied her face. There was no pretense, no performance. Just truth. He leaned back, his tone softening in a way that startled even him. "Let them wait," he said. "Prove them wrong. That's what I did when they told me I'd never build this company. You remind me of that fight." Her eyes widened, caught off guard by his admission. For the first time, she saw not just the CEO but the man behind the empire, a man who had clawed his way up from doubt. The silence stretched between them, heavy yet strangely comforting. Emily's pulse raced and she quickly glanced at her notes. "Was there something specific you wanted me to prepare for tomorrow?" He almost smiled again. "Yes. But more than that, I wanted to hear from you." The moment was broken when her phone buzzed. It was her neighbor, the baby's caretaker, checking in. Emily's face softened at the sound of her child's name. Alexander watched, his chest tightening with something he hadn't felt in years. That night, long after she had gone home, he found himself staring out his office window, thinking of her, of the way she stood her ground, of the quiet fire in her eyes. He had sworn never to let emotion interfere with business, yet she was breaking rules he didn't even know he had. And Emily, lying awake beside her sleeping baby, found herself replaying his words, his voice, the way he had defended her without hesitation. She shook her head, reminding herself of the risks. He was her boss. He was untouchable. But hearts rarely obey rules. Day by day, their worlds drew closer. Each glance lasted longer. Each conversation carried weight unspoken. Alexander, once cold and unreachable, found himself watching her in meetings, his thoughts wandering to places no contract could define. Emily, torn between gratitude and fear, felt her walls tremble each time his eyes lingered on her. Neither spoke it aloud, but destiny was already tightening its hold. Two lives, once worlds apart, were colliding with every passing hour, and both of them knew, whether they admitted it or not, that something had begun that neither could control. The storm outside painted the night sky in restless flashes of lightning. Emily sat by her baby's crib, whispering prayers into the dark. His little body burned with fever, his breaths shallow. She wiped his forehead again, tears stinging her eyes. Work had been relentless, but this was different. This was her whole world trembling in her arms. At dawn, his fever broke slightly. She dressed carefully, cradling him close, and made the hardest decision of her life. She would go to the office, baby in arms, not to work, but to resign. She couldn't keep both worlds balanced anymore. Something had to give. When she stepped into the glass tower that morning, whispers echoed louder than ever. Employees stared as she walked through the lobby with her child bundled in a blanket. Her heels clicked against the marble floor, each step heavier than the last. By the time she reached Alexander's office, her hands were trembling. She knocked softly. "Come in," his voice called. She entered, her breath caught in her throat. Alexander looked up from his desk, eyes sharpening the moment he saw the baby in her arms. His papers fell forgotten. He stood quickly, walking toward her. "What happened?" His voice was urgent, stripped of its usual control. Emily swallowed. "Art, he was sick all night. I couldn't leave him, and I came to tell you I can't keep doing this. I have to resign." For a long moment, silence filled the room. The rain against the windows seemed to echo the pounding in her chest. She expected anger, disappointment, dismissal. Instead, Alexander reached out and gently lifted the baby into his arms. Emily froze. The sight was almost unreal. The feared CEO cradling her child with surprising tenderness. His hand supported the baby's small head, his gaze softening in a way she had never seen before. "You're not resigning," he said firmly. Her lips parted. "But I can't give this company what it deserves. Not with family comes before work," Alexander interrupted, his voice steady. "Anyone who tells you otherwise has never known real strength." Her eyes filled with tears. She hadn't expected mercy. She hadn't expected kindness, and certainly not from him. "I thought," her voice shook, "I thought you would fire me." He looked at her then, really looked at her, as if weighing a decision that had been building inside him for weeks. "Emily, I don't see weakness when I look at you. I see someone who refuses to give up. I see the fire I once had when I built this company. And He paused, his jaw tightening, his voice lowering. "I see more than an employee." Her heart raced. "What do you mean?" His eyes held hers, unflinching. "You've broken through walls I swore no one ever would. I can't keep pretending that I don't care. I do. About you. About him." He looked down at the baby, then back at her. "I don't just want you in this company, Emily. I want you in my life." The words hit her like a wave, overwhelming and terrifying. She had carried her burdens alone for so long she had forgotten what it felt like to have someone reach for her. Tears slipped down her cheeks. "Alexander, this can't be. You're my boss. People will talk. They'll think I..." "Let them talk," he cut in sharply, though his tone carried warmth. "I've built my life ignoring what people say, and I've never been more certain of anything. I don't want perfection. I don't want masks. I want honesty. And that's you." Her walls, the ones she had built brick by brick through years of struggle, cracked under the weight of his words. She stepped closer, her voice trembling. "If you're serious, then I won't run." A faint smile tugged at his lips. "I've never been more serious." The office around them seemed to fade. It was no longer a battlefield of power and ambition, but a quiet sanctuary where two souls finally admitted the truth. Emily reached out, placing her hand over his as he held her baby. Her touch was gentle, yet it carried every ounce of trust she had been afraid to give. Alexander exhaled, almost in relief. "Then we start here, not as CEO and employee, but as something more." Her tears turned into a soft smile. For the first time in years, she felt safe, not because her struggles had vanished, but because she wasn't alone anymore. Later that evening, as they left the office together, Emily carried her baby while Alexander walked beside her. The storm had passed, the city lights flickering against the wet streets. People still stared, whispers still followed, but Emily no longer cared. What mattered was the man at her side, the child in her arms, and the future unfolding step by step. For Alexander, it wasn't about empire or image anymore. It was about the family he never thought he'd find standing right before him. And for Emily, it was about finally believing that love could exist even in the unlikeliest places, in a glass tower, in the heart of a man she once thought unreachable. Their story didn't end that day. It only began.